On a typical American farm in the early 1960s, a 17-year-old boy could lift a 100-pound bale of hay, throw it onto a flatbed wagon, and stack 200 or 300 more before sundown. He'd done it the day before. He'd do it again the next morning. He didn't think of himself as strong. He thought of himself as the youngest one out there. But today, men in commercial gyms deadlift 4 times that weight. They eat measured grams of chicken. They take rest days. Many of them, by their own admission, couldn't last a week on his grandfather's farm. There is a story you will hear in any small farming town in the Midwest, told 1,000 different ways. A grandfather, a great uncle, a neighbor's father, who could bend horseshoes with his bare hands, who picked up the back end of a tractor when it slipped off the jack, who carried 2 milk cans up a hill, 1 in each hand, when he was 63 years old. Those stories follow families from kitchen tables to barbershop chairs. The stories are sometimes exaggerated, sometimes they are not. But the question they keep circling back to is the same one. Were the men who ran those farms in the 1950s and 60s actually stronger than the bodybuilders we celebrate today? It sounds, at first, like an absurd comparison. On one side, you have men whose entire profession is picking things up and putting them down with maximum efficiency. They eat for it, they sleep for it. They have entire industries built around their training. On the other side, you have a man in denim overalls who never set foot in a gym, who probably never thought about protein in his life, and whose only programming was sunrise and sunset. The honest answer is more complicated than the question suggests, and it depends entirely on what you mean by stronger. Because the words we use for strength today, things like 1 rep max, hypertrophy, peak power output, those words did not exist for the men who built those farms. Their measure of strength was different. It was the haystack still being half done at noon. It was the calf you had to wrestle into the trailer. It was the fence post that needed setting before the storm came in. The other thing worth saying up front is that this question is not really about farms. It is about something men can sense they have lost, even if they cannot name it. The farmer of 1962 has become a kind of archetype, the way the cowboy was for the generation before. Not a literal job description, but an image. A man whose body is shaped by what he does, not by what he eats or watches. A man whose strength is invisible until he uses it. The men who actually lived it would mostly laugh at the romance of it. They wanted indoor plumbing. They wanted machines to do the work. They were not sentimental about hauling buckets in the dark before dawn. But the question keeps coming back, in barbershops and on Reddit threads, and in the comments under every old black and white farm photograph posted online. It comes back because the comparison is touching something real. So this is not a question about who would win in some imaginary contest. It is a question about what kind of body the work demanded, what kind of body the work produced, and what has been quietly traded away in the 70 years since most of those farms disappeared. To understand the body of a 1960s farmer, you have to start with the day, not the abstract idea of farm work, but the actual rhythm of hours and tasks that shaped a man from boyhood onward. In central Pennsylvania, in eastern Iowa, in the dairy country of Wisconsin, the day started somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning. The first task on a dairy farm was milking, and milking in 1962 still meant a man on a stool with a galvanized bucket between his knees on most small operations, even though milking machines had begun to appear. A skilled hand could empty a cow in about 10 minutes. A herd of 40 cows meant nearly 7 hours of squatting, gripping, and pulling before lunch. After milking came feeding. A bag of grain weighed 50 pounds. A bale of straw weighed 40 pounds. The pitchfork, the shovel, the wheelbarrow, the bucket. These weren't tools you used for 15 minutes a day. They were extensions of your hands for 10 hours. Then came the work that depended on the season. In summer, that meant hay. And hay is the test that everyone who ever lived on a farm in those years remembers, because hay is the work that breaks young men. A bale of hay in 1960 came off the baler tied with twine, weighing somewhere between 60 and 120 pounds, depending on the moisture and the size of the press. On a small farm, you did not have a hay elevator. You had a wagon, a barn, and your own back. 2 men in the field threw bales up to a man on the wagon. The man on the wagon stacked them 8 or 10 high until the load was finished. Then they drove back to the barn, where 2 more men, sometimes the same men, lifted each bale off the wagon and threw it up into a loft, where another man caught it and stacked it. A typical small farm might bring in 1,000 bales in a single afternoon. That is 1,000 lifts, 1,000 throws, 1,000 catches in 90-degree heat. Inside a barn loft, where the temperature climbed to 120 degrees, a hay loft in late July smelled like summer cooking on a hot plate. The chaff would float in the air like dust around a thresher, settling into the back of your throat, into your eyes, into the salt of your sweat. You had to keep your mouth closed and breathe through your nose, but your nose ran from the dust, so you tied a bandana around the lower half of your face and worked anyway. Boys went into the loft for the first time at 11 or 12, came out 2 hours later staggering, and went back the next day. They did not get a week off. They did not get a pep talk. The hay had to come in before the rain. That was the entire program. There was no rest day after that either. There were cows to milk that evening. There would be more hay tomorrow. The same rhythm carried into fall, when corn was harvested by hand on smaller plots, ear by ear, into a wooden wagon. It carried into winter, when fence posts had to be driven into frozen ground with a heavy iron bar, struck downward again and again until the post bit. It carried into spring when calves were pulled, sometimes by hand, from struggling cows. It carried into the daily, year-round work of moving water, hauling feed, and cleaning out stalls that filled with manure faster than anyone could keep up. A farmer in 1962 wasn't doing one big lift a day. He was doing thousands of medium lifts every day for 60 years. That accumulation is the thing the comparison misses when it focuses on raw maximums. The bodybuilder might lift 600 pounds once. The farmer lifted 100 pounds 6,000 times, and then did it again the next day. The men who lived this rhythm were not all enormous. Look at any photograph from a county fair in 1963, and you'll see something interesting. The farmers in the crowd are often lean, sometimes wiry. Their forearms look like rope. Their hands look too big for their bodies. They do not have the symmetrical, plated chests of trained physique athletes. They have the slightly uneven, slightly worn, deeply functional bodies of men who have been using themselves as tools their entire lives. That look is not the result of programming. It is the residue of a job. If you try to design a strength training program from scratch, with the goal of producing the most useful body possible for working a farm, you would probably end up with something close to what those men did by accident. You would want grip strength because everything you carry on a farm has a handle, a wire, or a coarse rope. Men who milked by hand for 15 years developed grips that could crush a green walnut. They could carry a 5-gallon bucket in each hand, filled up an icy slope, and not drop them. The hand of a man who had milked cows for 30 years was a strange and impressive object. The fingers were longer and thicker than the rest of him would suggest. The skin on the palms was leathered, sometimes splitting at the base of each finger from years of cold dawn squeezing. When measured by modern dynamometers on the rare occasions farmers were tested, grip strength regularly reached numbers that would qualify a man for elite competition today. Not because the farmer was training for grip, but because his life was a grip workout. 400 repetitions per cow, 40 cows each morning, 365 mornings a year, for 40 years. There are stories of farmers in their 70s who could still bend a 10-penny nail with a closed fist. Most of those stories are not exaggerated. You would also want compound movement strength. The squat, the deadlift, the carry, the press. These are the 4 core patterns of farm work. You want them all integrated, not isolated. You would not bench press because nothing on a farm involves lying on your back and pushing something away from your chest. You would want shoulder durability because every motion above shoulder height repeats thousands of times each year. Pitching hay, tossing bales, reaching up into mangers. The shoulders of a 50-year-old farmer who started at age 10 have absorbed more cumulative load than most professional athletes will see in a career. You would want stamina more than peak output. You do not get to fail and put the bar back. The cow has to be milked. The hay has to come in. The fence has to be fixed before the cattle find the gap. You would want all of this conditioned not over the 18 weeks of an off-season, but over decades, starting at age 6 or 7, when a child on a farm in 1952 was already feeding chickens, hauling water, and helping with calves. That kind of accumulated, integrated. Lifelong conditioning produces a specific physical adaptation. The medical literature has names for parts of it, like cortical bone thickness, tendon density, and type 1 muscle fiber capacity. What it produces in plain language is a man who is hard to break. There is a phrase old physical therapists in farming communities once used. They called it farm strong. It meant you could not predict what someone would lift or do based on how they looked. A wiry 60-year-old in worn boots could pick up the corner of a sedan to change a tire. A heavy-set woman who had milked cows for 40 years could carry a calf in her arms across a field. The body looked normal. The output did not. Modern strength science has come to recognize what farm work was building. They call it work capacity, or general physical preparedness. It is the ability to do hard physical labor for long durations, recover, and do it again tomorrow. By that measure, almost no one alive today, including elite bodybuilders, would touch the average 40-year-old dairy farmer of 1962. But that measure is not the only measure, and this is where the comparison has to be honest. The story of the indestructible farmer is in some ways true, but it is also a story that gets repeated in a particular way, and it is worth slowing down to ask what is missing from it. For one thing, the modern bodybuilder is, by almost any objective measure of raw force production, stronger than the 1960s farmer ever was. Arnold Schwarzenegger, in his prime, deadlifted in the high 700s of pounds. Reg Park squatted 600 pounds for reps in 1960 at Muscle Beach. Franco Columbu, who weighed under 190 pounds, deadlifted 750 pounds. These are not casual numbers. These are numbers that no 1960s farmer, no matter how strong he looked carrying milk cans, was hitting. The average farmer of that era did not squat his body weight for reps. He did not bench press. He did not have a 1 repetition maximum in any traditional lift because he never tested one. The strength he had was real, but it was distributed differently, spread thin across many tasks, rather than concentrated into a few maximal efforts. The comparison also suffers from selection bias. The grandfather you remember, the one who could carry 2 grain sacks up the silo ladder when he was 70, is the one who survived a life of physical labor without breaking. The men who did not survive it, the ones who blew out their backs at 30, lost fingers to threshers, developed early arthritis, or simply died young of overwork, do not make it into the family stories. There were many of them. Farm work in 1960 was the leading cause of injury in American men under 50. There is also survivorship bias in the photographs. The images we have of 1960s farmers are usually of the ones standing upright at county fairs, smiling beside prize calves. The ones in nursing homes at 58 with crushed vertebrae are not in the frame. And the diet, often celebrated in the modern retelling, was not a strength-building masterpiece. Yes, it was whole milk and eggs and beef, but it was also enormous quantities of refined white bread, sugary preserves, lard, and coffee. It was the diet of men burning 6,000 calories a day at hard labor. Drop that same diet onto a sedentary modern man, and the likely result is a heart attack at 45, which is exactly what happened to many farmers. Modern bodybuilders, for all the things you can fairly criticize about their world, are operating on something the 1960s farmer never had. They have actual sports science. They have an understanding of recovery. They have nutrition that, when done well, produces longevity, not breakdown. So when someone says a 1960s farmer would beat Arnold in a strength contest, the honest answer is that it depends entirely on the contest. In a 1-rep deadlift, Arnold wins by a comfortable margin. In an arm wrestle, Arnold probably wins on raw mass. In a 100-pound bale carry across a half-mile field, in 90-degree heat, with another 500 bales waiting to be done, the farmer doesn't just win. The farmer is on his 4th wagon load before Arnold has caught his breath. Both things are true at the same time, and it is the second one that the modern world has forgotten how to value. There is a kind of strength that doesn't show up in any gym record book, and it is the strength that the comparison is really pointing at. Take 2 men. One is a 28-year-old competitive bodybuilder, 6'1", 240 pounds of conditioned muscle, capable of squatting 600 pounds. The other is a 60-year-old former farmer, 5'10", 190 pounds, who has not lifted heavy in 30 years. Drop both of them in a field with 1,000 bales of hay and tell them they have to load every one onto a wagon by sundown. By the second hour, the bodybuilder has hit a wall he does not recognize. His muscles are not failing in the way they fail under a barbell. His grip is gone. His lower back is locked in a way it never locks during squats. His cardiovascular system, conditioned for 30-second sets and 3-minute rest periods, cannot keep up with the metabolic demand of repetitive medium-load work for 6 hours straight. The farmer is moving slower than he did at 30, but he is still moving. He has the cadence. He knows how to use his body weight to lift the bale, rather than just his arms. He knows how to carry on the side that is tired. His tendons and ligaments, conditioned over 50 years of similar work, do not strain or pop. He paces himself. By sundown, the farmer has loaded his quota, and the bodybuilder has not. That difference is what people are pointing at when they say a 1960s farmer was stronger. It is also what shows up in the long view, the body of a 60-year-old former farmer, even one who has slowed down considerably, is often less broken than the body of a 60-year-old former lifter, despite the lifter doing what looks, from the outside, like more impressive work. The reason for that is connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments adapt much more slowly than muscle. They need decades, not months. The tendons of a man who started lifting heavy at age 25 are in their first generation of adaptation. The tendons of a man who started carrying buckets at age 7 have been adapting for 53 years. You cannot shortcut connective tissue. You cannot supplement your way past it. You cannot even program for it in any meaningful way. It is the slow accumulation of the body responding to small loads repeatedly for a very long time. There is a long-standing observation in agricultural medicine, repeated across decades of clinical practice. Men who did manual farm labor from boyhood through their 60s had higher rates of acute injury than office workers of similar build. They lost fingers, they tore rotator cuffs, they herniated discs. But the chronic age-related decline that hits most modern men in their late 50s was, in the farmers, delayed by something like a decade. The farmer who survived to 60 arrived there with a body that had been hammered, but also tempered. The bones were denser. The joints, despite years of wear, often had more cartilage than expected, because the cartilage had been continuously loaded and rebuilt. The cardiovascular system, despite the rough diet and the smoking that was nearly universal in that generation, had been doing the equivalent of an elite athlete's training, 4 to 6 hours a day, for 50 years. Strength is one thing. Durability is another. The 1960s farmer had both in proportions that almost no other lifestyle, before or since, has produced. The modern bodybuilder, no matter how dedicated, almost never has it. The childhoods that produced it do not exist anymore. If you visit a working farm today, in Iowa or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, the operation looks nothing like the one your great-grandfather ran. The cows are milked by robots in automated parlors. The hay is rolled into giant cylindrical bales by a machine and lifted by a tractor with a hydraulic spear. The grain moves through automated augers. The fences are run by an electric pulse, no posts to set. The work that took 12 hands in 1960 now takes one man with a controller and a smartphone. That is not a tragedy. That is progress. And the men who lived through the old way of doing things would mostly tell you they are glad it changed. The injuries were brutal. The hours were inhuman. The early deaths were common. But something has been quietly lost in the transition, and it is not just nostalgia. For most of human history, until somewhere around 1970 in the developed world, the daily life of an ordinary man involved physical work as a default, not as an addition, not as a hobby, not as something you scheduled for 45 minutes after dinner. A constant, unconscious, integrated background of using the body the way the body evolved to be used. That is gone. For most men in modern life, it is completely gone. The replacement, the gym, is no small thing. It builds bodies that no farmer of 1960 would have recognized as possible. But it is also, by its nature, a compensation. It is the deliberate, scheduled effort to undo what 8 hours of sitting at a desk has done. It is, in some sense, a museum of the kind of physicality that used to be ordinary, recreated 3 hours a day under fluorescent lights. The 1960s farmer didn't go to the gym because his life was the gym. The work was woven into the day. The rest was woven into the seasons. The body adapted to the labor, and the labor adapted to the land, and the land set the pace of both. The bodybuilder of today has separated all of that. The work is here. The recovery is here. The food is here. The strength is over there. The integration is gone. What is left is technique, dedication, and a serious amount of willpower applied to recreating, 3 hours a day, the body that was once the byproduct of simply being alive. So were the men who ran those farms in 1960 actually stronger than the bodybuilders we admire today? In the way most people mean it, no. They could not outlift Arnold. They could not outpress a modern strongman. And they did not move the kind of weight that rewrites a record book. But they could outlast almost anyone alive today. They could repeat, they could integrate, and they could put a body to use, day after day, for 50 years, and still arrive at 60 able to do the work. The question is not really which one is stronger. The question is what kind of strength the world used to demand of an ordinary man, and what kind it demands now. Somewhere between the milk pail and the protein shake. Something changed. The strength did not disappear. It just got moved indoors, scheduled into windows, separated from the rest of life, and made into a hobby instead of a way of being. Maybe the better question is not who is stronger. Maybe the better question is what kind of body the world will demand of the men coming up next, and whether anything we build in a gym can substitute for the strength that used to come simply from being needed. The men who remember the first kind are getting older every year in a country that no longer asks anyone to be that strong.